A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is just after 9:40, and I would like us to proceed with this morning's session. First of all, I would like to welcome each and every one of you here on this beautiful cold morning in Johannesburg. It might be early for some of you, but thank you very much for your attendance. My name is Pierre Ackerman. I will be facilitating today's session. And with me today, we've got the delegation who are fresh from the United States. I've got Dr. Cornay Mulder. He is the leader of the Freedom Front Plus. It is a party that's currently part of the GNU, and he was also the convener of the delegation to the United States. I've got Dr. Theo de Jager. He is the Executive Director at Southern African Agri-Initiative, better known as SAI. Then we do have Mr. Gerard Papenfuss. He is the Chief Executive of the National Employees Association of South Africa, NIASA. And at the very end, we've got Mr. Chris Opperman from C5 Capital. Ladies and gentlemen, I will give them an opportunity to brief you on the meetings they held in the United States and also about the sort of talks that were held. And from that point onwards, I will give you an opportunity for question and answers to the panel. So without further ado, Dr. Mulder, you've got the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Is this supposed to work? He doesn't really want to. Yeah. One second. Fine. Can you hear me? No, it's gone. It was on for a second. It's gone. I think it's now working. Yes, thank you very much. Thanks. Yes, that's fine. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and thank you for attending this media briefing. We intended to have this meeting earlier, but as you perhaps know, our flight from London was cancelled. And because of that, we had to postpone our press briefing until this morning. As was pointed out to you, these are the colleagues within the delegation. The four of us basically attended all the interactions and all the meetings in the United States in Washington, D.C. Now, as you're all aware, things in South Africa to a certain extent attained a new dynamic in the last couple of months with regard to the United States. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that the Trump administration has taken certain steps regarding South Africa. We can all recall that President Trump started off quite early in the year in February with the executive order with certain implications. Then later on, the South African ambassador, Mr. Rasool, was asked to leave the United States. And then also some delegations went abroad to the United States, specifically to Washington, D.C. And we also had the delegation led by the President, Mr. Ramaphosa, and some other officials and some individuals. We've been contacted, me and some of the other colleagues have been contacted during this process by some individuals, by some organizations, and the point was made that we should come to Washington and to put the case. First of all, the case of the Afrikaner community, because many of these things dealt with the Afrikaner and Afrikaner issues, as well as what is exactly happening with regard to South Africa and the relationship between the United States and South Africa. We also then were invited, C5 Capital played a role in inviting us to come to Washington. We did not put the delegation together. We were invited in this fashion, and I think it made absolute sense. Me, myself, from the political perspective, a political point of view, Dr. de Jager from everything agriculture and dealing with those issues, and Mr. Gerard Papenfuss with regard to the economy, business, all those kind of things that relate in that instance. And I think we, in the end, after we've now come back after 10 days, we were a good team and we were very well received. The first point I would like to make is that we could not preempt before we went that it would be a challenging time in the United States and in Washington, D.C. while we were there. While we were there, on our way, the whole situation with regard to the conflict between Israel and Iran broke out. And the implications for the United States, and certain decisions that were taken by the United States also played a role in Washington. Secondly, there was the process going on in terms of what is known as the Big Beautiful Bill that deals with a huge number of tax proposals, etc., that is very important to the Trump administration, needed to be processed, and it was passed last night by the Senate after a tie with a final vote by the Vice President. And thirdly, soon the United States Congress will go into a recess. So all those things we had to take into consideration. But despite all those realities, we had a very successful visit to the Washington, D.C., and we were very well received. And I want to indicate that we had meetings and discussions with different segments and different interests in the capital, the Washington, D.C. But in all those instances, and in all the meetings we had, we specifically had meetings with people responsible for Africa and dealing with, in that regard, also with South African issues. And in that regard, we had a meeting in the White House. The same happened in the Senate, the same in the House of Representatives, and also in the State Department that deals with these things. We also met with different institutions and think tanks. We had meetings with agri-unions, and we also met some of the people in the business sector in the United States. So it was a very comprehensive visit. Within 5-6 days, we were able to accommodate all of these things. Our meeting started off on the first Monday with a panel discussion at the Hudson Institute, which is a very formidable and very well-respected policy think tank in Washington, D.C., the Hudson Institute. And we were given the opportunity to put a perspective, an Afrikaner perspective, on the current state of relations between the United States and South Africa. That presentation was followed by a question and answer session. Some of it has been sent and broadcast back to South Africa, and I think many of you may have taken note of that. The panel discussion was led by a senior fellow there, Mr. Joshua Maservi. We also had a meeting at America the First Policy Institute. We also were at the Cato Institute, where Mr. Marion Tupi accommodated us. At the America First Policy Institute, a number of colleagues were there. Jacob Olidark basically took me there. On the agricultural side, and Dr. Diager will deal with the details when it comes to there. We had meetings with two of the big unions there, and well, they basically represent all the farmers in the United States, but he will deal with that. And then with regard to the Hill, where we had contact in the Senate as well as in the House of Representatives. The important committee, as far as we are concerned, and the challenges that we face in the United States in the Senate, is basically the Committee on Foreign Relations, and there's a subcommittee on Africa, which is chaired by Senator Ted Cruz. We also met with his national security team, with Mr. Brandon Gint, his national security advisor, Madison Sparber, the foreign policy legislative expert in that office in the national security team of Senator Ted Cruz. We had meetings in Congress, the House of Representatives, with Congressman Ed Mills. He represents Texas, the 22nd District, and he's a co-author of a bill that deals with South Africa. We also had interaction with Dan Braswell. He's a defense fellow in the office of Congressman Michael McCall, who represents Texas, the 10th District. He was part of one of the discussions we had. The same with the professional staff member Michael McCabe, who is the professional staff member of Chairman Brian Mast, who is the House Foreign Affairs Committee chairperson. We also had a meeting in the office of Congressman Ronnie Jackson. He's Texas, the 13th District representative. And we met the senior legislative assistant, Dr. Katie Wallach. And this is very important because Congressman Ronnie Jackson is the person or the congressman that took responsibility to bring the U.S.-South Africa Bilateral Relations Review Act of 2025. This act intends to do a complete review of the relations and the state of relations between the United States and South Africa. In the White House, we had a very successful meeting where we dealt with all the issues relevant as far as we're concerned in South Africa with regard to the things that happened in the Oval Office discussion, as well as things that are important to the Afrikaner community and other minorities in South Africa and how we want to deal with that. I'll come back to that meeting just now. Then we also had a meeting at the United States Department of State, the Bureau of African Affairs that specifically deals with Africa. We there met with Melanie Higgins, She's the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Southern Africa. And there were other individuals as well. Mr. Joe Foltz, he is in charge of basically the director of all personnel on the Republican side in Congress, in a very influential position. We had some people from the Office of the Vice President, the director in charge of the whole refugee program, and as you can hear, it was a very, very comprehensive program that we had, and I can say from our perspective, I think it was quite successful. I want to start off by saying we did not go to the United States to complain. We were not going there as a complaining group that just want to go and say, this is bad, this is bad. That's not why we went. We made it clear right from the beginning that we would like to see our country prosper. We would like to see that our country is a success in terms of becoming, once again, a winning nation in a winning country. However, we were out of view that there are certain challenges that are making that very difficult and that are preventing that. And if we want to succeed, we needed to discuss these things in a very frank manner, and we did. I was amazed, and if I can just say this, Mr. Chris Opperman, who accompanied us, is based in Washington. Chris was a member of South Africa's Foreign Relations Department for many, many years prior to 1994, and he also served since 1994 for a stint. And he was able to assist us in terms of getting doors to open for us to be heard. And he will refer to that just now and give you his impression of what happened. I was impressed in terms of who were prepared to talk to us, who were prepared to see us. One of the important things that we came with after the visit was the request that we should communicate to South Africa, that we should communicate to the government, that in order to reset relations between the United States and South Africa, the White House, the Trump administration has got 4 specific non-negotiable preconditions. And immediately it was queried afterwards by some. Some said, but that sounds very strange. How is it possible that the Trump administration will interact with a delegation like this and not officially with South Africa in terms of DIRCO? The reply was, they have done so, but they are concerned that it seems that they are not heard, that the things that they put on the table as preconditions to reset relations between the United States and South Africa is either not taken seriously or is not being heard. So we dealt with that. We had a very successful meeting in that regard, and Dr. De Jager will just now give an indication of how that process played out in terms of that meeting, in terms of how those preconditions were then communicated to South Africa. I also undertook that when I'm back, being part of the Government of National Unity, I will in writing communicate what came out of that meeting to President Ramaphosa. I undertook that to the White House, and also to the leaders of the other parties in the Government of National Unity. Interesting enough, I was on the plane this morning back from Cape Town, and in the business day of today, there's an interesting article that deals with this whole crisis, the whole issue dealing with trade and the tariff barriers that will come into effect a week from today. And in this article, I think it's on page 2, it quotes our Minister of Trade, Mr. Pakstau, and he basically goes ahead and then he says, there's a group of African countries that have now applied to the United States for a further exemption to give more time to negotiate. If that's going to be done, I don't know. It may be, it may be not. But interesting enough, he refers to a new template that comes from the United States, a template to assist countries in terms of making proposals for trade. And then there's a very interesting quote here which I read, which says the following: the framework, that's not a new template, the framework deal addresses US concerns relating to, among others, non-tariff barriers. And those non-tariff barriers are the things that were conveyed to us in the White House by the Trump administration. So one will make a huge mistake to just think it's about this, that, and the other. You can just quickly sit down and have a trade deal. From the United States, from the Trump administration's point of view, there are certain non-tariff barriers. And my colleagues will refer to that. So with that, from my side, as an opening statement, I think we had a very successful meeting, a series of meetings. It's not the first and only time. We've been asked by many of the people that we spoke to that we need to come back. We hope that this could bring, and we want to bring back to South Africa, a very positive and constructive message. The United States and the Trump administration wants to deal with South Africa in a positive manner, and there are vast opportunities. But there are certain problems that first need to be addressed. And we are bringing that back and say, let's address these things, and we can have a completely different situation. As an opening statement, thank you very much. I would like to give the opportunity to my colleagues, perhaps. Dr. Kiel, would you like to go ahead? Please.
Yes.
Pierre.
Thank you, Dr. Mulder. Dr. Mulder already said that before we left from this airport, we made a deal with each other that we are not going there to complain. We are going there with a value proposition, and that value proposition is more or less that the USA's interest is inter alia to keep refugees out of their country, but nothing stops a hungry man. No fence, no river, no sea. There's only one way to stop economic migrants from running elsewhere, also to the United States. And that is to create proper livelihoods in their own countries where they are. The biggest war of our generation on our continent is the war on poverty and hunger. And there's really only one way to win that war. That's by creating wealth. And in Africa, we can do that. There is no sector of the economy of this continent that can create more wealth in a shorter space of time on a broader basis than agriculture can, because we sit with more or less 46% of the world's underutilized agricultural land on this continent. Today we have a network of South African and Zimbabwean farmers of about 4,800 in 44 countries in Africa. And our value proposition is, assist us to do that investment. We do not claim as South African farmers and Afrikaners that we understand Africa. We know that we do not understand her, but we understand her much, much better than the Chinese or the Dutch or the Brazilians or the Americans or any of the other aggressive investors in the agricultural arena. But what we need to unlock the wealth of this continent and to make a contribution is a policy environment which is conducive to profitable farming. We are gradually losing that even in South Africa. You cannot invest in a country which is threatening to expropriate your property, even at no compensation. You cannot invest in a country where you are not safe, where you have farm attacks and farm murders. You cannot. We need a policy environment which will safeguard investment. We say to them, capital is as shy as a deer. You scare it and it runs. We do not have access to production financing, not even in South Africa anymore. We need that kind of access. There's nowhere in the world where you can grow the agricultural sector without proper access to production financing. And most of production financing hinges on two things: on security, surety or collateral, which is mostly title deeds. You need certainty in property rights. And secondly, you need insurance. You need to be able to safeguard yourself against the risk, because in agriculture your biggest partner is nature itself. And nature can be an uncomfortable partner, especially in an environment as we have in Africa. I also cleared it out with my colleagues before we left here that I want to use this opportunity to put the case of Zimbabwe on the table in the USA. My organization is also the biggest representative of Zimbabwean farmers, both white farmers who lost their land in the fast-track land reform since 2000, and also the Matabele farmers who lost their land, their cattle, and many lives in the Guguriundi massacres of the mid-1980s. But alas, the Americans do not have Zimbabwe on their radar at the moment. They do not even seem to be much interested in the rare earth minerals and other opportunities in Zimbabwe. They said to us in no uncertain terms that the principle is more important than the trade. And the principle is there must be equal citizenship, there must be respect for property rights, and there must be environment in which you can earn dollars in the deep rural areas and create jobs where it is needed most. And that policy environment is not there. And they pulled it directly through to our situation here. And Dr. Mulder said that I would cover this. We sat in the White House and we discussed these conditions to restore the economy in South Africa too. And then all of a sudden, from across the table, they said, we've heard you now. We've heard you on farm safety, and we've heard you on BEE, and especially BEE as a non-trade barrier, a non-tariff trade barrier. And we heard you on the Expropriation Act. But now you must hear us too. Because it seems as if this voice is not heard in South Africa, not via your embassy and not via the delegation of government. There are these four conditions. The trade relationship with the USA will not be restored until these four conditions have been met. And those are the four conditions Dr. Mulder referred to. I think there is one more important meeting which we need to report on, and that was the meeting with business people. And there are these group of business people who have been importing fruits, nuts, juices, a lot of foodstuffs from South Africa. And they said to us basically, the market here is virtually limitless. There are 3 million people here. They have these networks of shops. When they heard that I'm farming subtropical fruits, the guy who sat next to me said to me, I will buy everything you can produce. The market there is very important to us. It is a massive market. And because they pay in dollar, and because of the conditions they have in terms of standards, the moment you have a farm accredited to export to the USA, you create jobs. And this is what we are after. We asked over and over, is there a way for us to still save our position in AGOA? And we seriously got the impression that the bullet is not through the church yet on AGOA. The decision to kick us out has not been made, and we pleaded. We said, what do you need us to do not to be kicked out? Of course, the new tariff arrangement will probably trump AGOA. We said to them, don't punish the whole of South Africa if you have a quarrel with one of the political parties. Don't hurt us all if the problem can be solved by simply engaging or putting pressure on one or two political parties to change their policies. And I think that this message was seed which found fertile ground in the USA. I was very thankful after these meetings for the message which I can bring back to farmers, both those who are exporting to the USA at the moment, but more important, those who have the ambition to do so. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. De Jager. Mr. Dalton, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Mulder. Yeah, this was indeed a very special engagement, series of engagements. And my role, amongst others, was to explain what's happening in our economy vis-a-vis the relationship we have with the United States. And a big task of mine was to explain why, after 30 years of democracy, why when we were supposed to leave distinguishing our nation as a nation of race arrangements, that 30 years later we're back into a very racist society where even commercial decisions are made on the basis of race. And people were simply amazed on the other side in America to what extent South Africa wants to arrange our society and our economy on the basis of race. And no country can afford to exclude a portion of their population out of economic life. And if you want to exclude whites and the Afrikaner population from the economy, South Africa will pay a huge price. South Africa cannot afford to exclude us. In fact, South Africa can afford to exclude anyone from the economy, but South Africa is excluding a number of our people from the economy. We have a 45% unofficial unemployment rate, if it isn't more. That 45% people that can work is excluded from economic life. While they can, on the one hand, they have the potential to make a contribution to the economy, to make us rich, they are now a burden to the economy. Our youth unemployment stands at 62%. They are a burden to the economy instead of making a contribution, and the reason for that is poor economic policy, and that we had to explain. And there is no business confidence, very low business confidence. People, foreign investors is becoming very shy to invest in South Africa. In fact, the trend is now going out, not coming in, and we cannot afford that. So the question had to be answered, what is it that causes that? Now there's many reasons, but one of the very, very big reasons for this is South Africa's transformation policies. The fact that they want to re-engineer society and even business in terms of race, redefine business in terms of race. And I took a lot of effort to explain what has happened with employment equity, which affects American businesses. What is required of business now is to conduct business on a spreadsheet, divide the whole entire workforces in terms of race, all races, the different races, and then in gender. Now, I'm not going to explain that here, but that I had to explain in detail, time and time again. And I gather, although they believed what I said, because that is a fact, they couldn't believe that the government can go so far to interfere so deep in the life of a business. Now the message is this: foreign businesses aren't interested to comply with that. You cannot tell a businessman, and you cannot tell a foreign government, a foreign business investor in South Africa, how they must appoint people in their businesses. If you tell them that, they won't do business in South Africa. I had to explain that if you leave business and you go into your own business, that at some point you will be forced to take in a colleague, a partner, not of your choice, but based on color. Now, here's the message. Business cannot do that. And this is the message to government. And this is the condition that has been directly, clearly put forward by the American government. Do not put this restrictions, race restrictions in terms of BE and employment equity on our businesses in South Africa. This is a condition, it's very clear. But you must also understand that this is what the United States has said now. But this will spill over to Europe. Europe won't be interested. Nobody that invests in a country is interested to prescribe to, please come invest here, but we will tell you how you must invest, who you must employ, what extent of your partnership, of your shares, your ownership you must give over to that, hand over to that country. That is a form of expropriation without compensation. Hand over to us a portion of your business. No businessman, and I'm talking South African business, can do that, and no foreign business is interested to do that. The government need to take serious note of this position. Our economy is in decline, and it will not stop. The decline will continue, and not only continue, it will accelerate towards a cliff unless government stop this. And this is the message that I carried over. For them to tell them what is happening here. This government will have to abandon their race policies. It's outdated, it's not appreciated, not in South Africa and nowhere. That was the message. The message is then also in our discussions with business. They want to do business with South Africa. South Africa is rich in manpower, we are rich in resources, we can make this South Africa very prosperous again. But our legislative framework as it stands in the way. And this is something that this government will have to deal with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Balkenfries. Mr. Oberman.
Dr. Mulder, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity. I handle government affairs and public policy for C5 Capital in Washington. C5 Capital is a venture capital firm, a US company that invests in Africa and in Southern Africa. And we have received various delegations, a host of various delegations from South Africa because of our interest in promoting relations, bilateral relations, to facilitate closer economic ties. We are very thankful for the Trump administration's interest in Africa and its interest in peace, also because of the signature of the Congo-Rwanda peace deal. That is going to be a major boost for US investments in that part of the world. And South Africa is and has been a natural ally of the United States for many years. Since 1994, there has been a close relationship between the United States and South Africa, close bilateral ties. But being in Washington, we've realized and become increasingly concerned about the breakdown of that relationship. And also become aware, being there and knowing what's going on, that there is definitely a breakdown also in communication, and it was clear to us that clear messages were not getting through to facilitate an improvement of the bilateral relationship. As Afrikaners, I'm an Afrikaner. Andre Pina, the founder of C5 Capital, is an Afrikaner. We felt a moral obligation to do what we can in the interest of South Africa, in the interest of the bilateral relationship, to do something about this. And because of the fact that the Afrikaner community has become a bone of contention and has become very topical in the bilateral relationship, we decided to invite an Afrikaner delegation to Washington because we realized that a lot has been said about Afrikaners, but the Afrikaner community has not had an opportunity to speak on their own behalf. And The choice of delegation was based on the fact that Dr. Corneille Mulder represents an important Afrikaner constituency in Parliament, and we have over the last 2 years been inviting Dr. Mulder to come over. We thought it was also important to get a perspective from the business side, and that's why Khaled Papenkoes was invited, because of the role of his organization as a backbone of the South African economy in terms of small and medium business owners and employers. And then, obviously, Dr. De Jager is the CEO or chair of the largest agricultural organization in Southern Africa, and plays a very important role also with regard to very topical issues relating to farm safety, rural safety, but also the opportunities that the United States offer for the export of agricultural produce. And I must say that we had really good access. The Trump administration really opened their doors. We had high-level access at State, the Department of State, at the White House, on the Hill, both in the Senate and in the Congress. We were able to get the message across and distinguish between South Africa and South Africans that are pro-American, that share the values of the United States. South Africa and the US share the same values, and to distinguish between South Africa and South Africans and the interests of South Africans, and then very specifically policies that is creating conflict and tension between South Africa and the United States. So I think it's been a bigger success than we anticipated, also because of the fact that the US administration and the White House very specifically had a message that they wanted to get across to the public of South Africa, and asked that this delegation deliver that message. So from a C5 perspective, our role was just as a facilitator. We have an interest in an improved bilateral relations because we believe that Africa is a very important investment destination for US technology, both in energy and as well as in the digital economy, AI. The world is shrinking, and the US is a major opportunity also for Africa. And we believe that South Africa must play its role, and we all have an interest in an improved and a normalized bilateral relation.
Yes. I just want to add one thing before we go to questions, if anybody. Can I correct in case? Thanks. No, I just want to once again repeat the 4 preconditions that were given to us in the White House and ask that we convey that in South Africa. The first one was that with regard to rural safety and attacks in the rural areas, with regard to farms, farmers, black and white, doesn't matter, with regard to workers in the rural areas, there's an insistence, a condition that the United States Trump administration wants the South African government to proclaim that as priority crimes immediately, and that it should be investigated, all incidents, by the Hawks or some institution on that level. That was the first one. The second one was that the ANC should publicly, unequivocally denounce kill the boer, kill the farmer. I specifically asked, are you talking about the government of national unity? What are you talking about? And the response was, we want the ANC as a political party to do that in public. The third one dealt with the whole question of expropriation without compensation. And the argument was put, and the condition that was set was to say there can be no expropriation without fair market compensation. after all the legal steps were taken in terms of what is needed in terms of the rule of law. And the last one dealt basically then as a precondition with black economic empowerment. And the condition was that American entities and American firms should be exempt from those race-based policies that were mentioned just now as non-tariff trade barriers in order to normalize relations between the United States and South Africa. We then, that evening, draw up a press statement from our side to convey this message. And because we did not want to have any uncertainty, we then consulted the contents of that statement with the White House to make sure that we do not convey the wrong message. And there were one or two small amendments, and then the statement was issued. So anyone who thinks that these conditions are figments of our imagination, or that we went, as somebody said, we stood outside the White House and thought, what can we do? No. You will do that at your own peril. It should be taken note of that these things are set as preconditions for the normalization of the relationship between the United States, South Africa's second largest trading partner, the strongest economy in the world, and the strongest military power in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. A very insightful update and a very busy schedule indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, I will open the floor now for question and answers. I would like to ask you just to keep the questions very short and direct. If you could kindly just indicate who you are and which media house you're from. You are welcome to direct a question to any of the gentlemen here, and they will answer it. We'll take it from my left to your right. I've got a mic here, I'll bring it to the floor, and you can proceed. Thank you very much.
Hallo, ek is Tanya Heinz van Marina Media. My eerste vraag vir julle is, wat sê die Amerikaners, hoe het hulle president Ramaphosa en sy afvaardiging se besoek aan die Withuis beleef? Het dit erger gemaak? Het hulle saak goed gestel? Wat dink die Amerikaners van daardie besoek in die Oval Office?
Kan ek verantwoord? Ja. Yes, ek gaan in Afrikaans antwoord. Kom ek sê so, daar was nie in een gesprek, iemand wat gedink het dat daar die gebeure in die Oval Office tot Suid-Afrika se voordeel was. Dit was gesien as 'n fiasco, as 'n verleentheid, en ek gaan nie met detail ingaan nie, maar ek kan julle verseker dit kon erger gewees het. Maar daar is gestop op 'n stadium om dit nie verder te vat. Maar die behouding was geweest dat dit 'n fiasco was. En ek wil op alle respek sê, ek dink dit is dalk 'n bietjie naïef, enigiemand dink dat as gevolg van die verhouding wat op die rotse gegaan het in Suid-Afrika tussen ons en die VSA, dat mense op 'n maklike, ligtelike manier gou die probleem kan oplos en sê, maar dit is nie so erg nie, moenie bekommer nie, kom ons praat gou oor handel. Nee. Die VSA is adamant. Die Trump-administrasie is baie sterk in hulle standpunt en hulle gaan nie daarvan pad gee. So ek is bevrees, waar ons was, het niemand gedink dat dit 'n groot sukses was nie. En om terug te kom Suid-Afrika toe dit aan te dui dat dit 'n groot sukses was, is ongelukkig feitelik nie korrek.
Baie dankie, Dr. Mulder. Next question.
Dit is Gert van die Universiteit van die Vryheidsfront. Dr. Mulder, can I ask you, what is the view of the government of national unity in the United States? Do they think it's a good thing? Do they think it should be kept together for another 5 years?
If I understand you correctly, what is the view within the United States towards the government of national unity? I think that colleagues can also join in. I think the people we spoke to wants to see that the government of national unity is a success, that it operates and functions effectively, and that it can go forward and complete the term. We've had 1 year now, there's 4 years to go. In the United States also, the creation of the government of national unity brought positive responses, it brought better investment trust, if I can put it that way. And there are serious concerns that it seems that the government of national unity is in trouble. But in general, you didn't speak to anyone who said we think it's a bad idea, get rid of it. No.
With the SABC, Africans in this show. So the first question that I want to pose to you is that you said you went to the White House. From the President of the United States office, who did you exactly meet? Second one, I mean, the Trump administration is having serious political and economic challenges in the US, and there are fears that Republicans might lose majority. Don't you think this trip might yield fruitless results? I'm just going to squeeze in more just to wrap up last two questions that I have. South Africa is an independent state. How do you expect America to interfere in internal affairs of another democratic state? And lastly, what were your submissions regarding the genocide claims and the refugee issue? Thank you very much.
Please try to respond. If I do not remember all four of them, you will remind me. A colleague can also assist. When the South African delegation went to the United States with President Ramaphosa, I did an interview the Sunday before they left. I said, I think the visit by our head of state is premature, and I predicted that it would be a diplomatic catastrophe. And the reason I gave was, given the strained relations between South Africa and the United States, you do not start these things on the level of heads of state. If you do that, things will play out the way they did in the Oval Office. You start these things on a way lower level between officials that start to interact with one another and to see there's some common ground. So our intention was not to meet elected officials in the White House at the highest level. That would be the wrong approach. We met with senior officials in the White House. Our information is that the file on South Africa has been given as an assignment or the responsibility to the Vice President. So we met people in the office of the Vice President. We met people in charge of the National Security Council, as well as in the Homeland Security Council. I don't think it's appropriate at this stage to give their specific names. I'm not going to do that. You can contact them if you want to ask who they are, but the information that we've given, you can confirm that with the White House. I've got no problem with that. The second question with regards to the Republican majority, and maybe this is a future exercise. That's what the Democrats in the United States hope for. They hope to get some power back. At this stage, there is control in the American administration on the level of the executive, the presidency, both in the Senate as well as in the House of Representatives. And we are dealing with that. It may be that in the midterm, the Republicans lose control over the House, we don't know. But President Trump will still be President Trump and will still be the president for the next 4 years. And there are some people that say, well, this is it may be followed by another 8 years with another Republican president. There's a gentleman called J.D. Vance. We don't know. But it's not for us to say, well, we think they may lose power and because of that it is a wasted opportunity. No, it's definitely not. The reality is that the current administration has reached out to South Africa. They've reached out by name to the Afrikaner people. We will be foolish not to act on that, and we are constructive and positive. Then, what do we think about the United States interfering into the affairs of an independent country, South Africa? No country in the world nowadays can live in isolation unless you want to become North Korea. You can't. There's interaction between all countries in the world. International trade deals with all countries. Whether we like it or not, South Africa, the United States is the second largest trading partner in the world. And the Trump administration has taken upon themselves, and President Trump personally, that his focus is very much on creating peace wherever he goes, whether that be in the Middle East, whether that's in the DRC and Rwanda, with all kinds of approaches. He did that at the end of his first term with the Abraham Accords. There are now new accord. And part of our message was we would like to see an Abraham kind of accord for South Africa to unlock the conflict that is here. I don't think the United States is interfering with South Africa. If South Africa prefers the United States to have nothing to do with South Africa, we should just ignore these 4 preconditions. It will happen automatically. If we believe it's in the best interest of South Africa, ignore these 4 preconditions, and there will be no involvement separate from interference. Our concern is, and we've made the point, Professor William Gumede did an investigation, and he came out with a report about 2 weeks ago that says, conservatively, 1 trillion rand, that is $55 billion US dollars, was in the name of black economic empowerment spread amongst less than 100 people in South Africa. I would like to interact with President Gumede and get the details of that. I would like to know who these individuals are, because that's not black economic empowerment. That's black elite enrichment. And if you then look at the unemployment figure in South Africa, the largest percentage of the population that suffers from that are black people. That cannot be in the interest of anyone. So if we can move away from those kind of policies, then we have to do what is necessary. I don't see this interference at all. A government that does not want to take the right steps and benefit the majority of its own citizens should perhaps then be redirected, and it's not interference. The last one with regard to the genocide claims. And before we left, we said to each other, we should expect to be asked in the United States about genocide. Interesting enough, we were not asked that question. Nowhere, not once. And I would say it depends on what your definition of genocide would be. And I think if I say the word genocide, each person in this room will have perhaps a different perception in his or her head. What does genocide mean? The fact of the matter is, we did not go there to claim a genocide in terms of the perception of people who think that there are dead bodies strewn all over South Africa. That's not what we said. Although the reality is, if you look at our murder rate, 80 murders every day in South Africa. That is serious. There's serious problems in that regard. So the fact is that if you look at the rural situation and you look at farmers, and I can show you now, go with me, I've got pictures of that. Go to the Nampo exhibition facility in the Free State and look at the mural with thousands of names there of farmers being murdered on farms in South Africa. What is that? The point we did make was, yes, there are murders in other sectors of society. There are murders on the Cape Flats, that's true. There are femicide, we know that. There are gender-based violence. But when it comes to farmers, that's the only community in South Africa where people fill stadiums of people and then are being led in chants of kill the farmer, kill the boer. That is not normal. That is not acceptable. In South Africa, we've been so traumatized. We are all suffering from Stockholm syndrome that we think it's okay. Even the Constitutional Court decided it's okay. It's not okay. Nowhere else in the world does anyone think that that is acceptable. So we did put on the table, obviously, and that is one because I think not because we said so. The United States administration has its own views on that. We heard what President Trump said right from the beginning. And that is why he expects the ANC to denounce that specific slogan. And if you look internationally at the definition of genocide, we can have discussion on the definition of genocide and the different steps of genocide. If you start to identify people in terms of race, if you start to discriminate against certain sectors of society, you are taking one step after the other towards creating that kind of reality.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mulder. Are there any more questions from anyone?
Hi, Dr. Mulder, good morning. It's Thinking Kize from AFP. I just want to find out, did you get a chance to meet some of the refugees or farmers that have left the country? And if so, what was your impression?
I'm going to ask Dr. Diasta to refer to that. You know what happened, yeah.
The answer is no, we did not speak to the refugees who went over, but we had a number of discussions about them. We did meet with these young farmers who every year go to work on farms in the USA. In my organization, we try to keep track of them, and this year we will be keeping track of about 16,200 of them. But we heard while we were there that some 25,000 visas have been granted for this season. Now these youngsters come back with some cash in their pockets, and more important for us, with some exposure to technologies and machinery which we do not have yet, and also with management models of farms and primary production, especially digital technologies, which is valuable for us in the future. We did discuss with them the program, both in the White House and at the Department of State, and it's very clear that they have their minds on pushing through with this. Apparently, there's about 25,000 on a list awaiting access to this program. From our side, we said to them, we are not in the business of exporting farmers or any other economically active parts of society. For us, first prize would be to keep people here and give them a proper livelihood here. But there are these three categories of people who are on those lists. There are some of these youngsters who work there every year and who feel that they understand the system there, that there are opportunities for them which are not available here in South Africa. And this is why they would go there every year. They see more opportunities for them in the USA than in South Africa. Then there is a category of people who are families of middle-aged white men who, because of BEE policies, have lost their jobs and their livelihoods here, who cannot find a new job yet, and they believe that they will have a better future in the USA. And then there's a third category of traumatized people who fell victim of farm attacks. It's a much smaller group, and who are we to say to them, you must hang in there, you have a role to play still in South Africa. But we repeatedly said to the officials on that side that we are here to stay in South Africa, and everyone who leaves our shores to go there, for us it is a loss.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Any more questions before we close? We've got one more question at the back.
You said to meet with the, you said that you meet with the president to just brief him in terms of how your trip went. Have you engaged him? Have you set a date or communicated with the president on that?
Unfortunately, our plane landed about 1 o'clock yesterday morning. So the fact that we are awake is a bonus. No, there hasn't been time to do so yet, but I'll do so immediately as I can.
Thank you very much, everyone. I believe that concludes this session. I don't know if any of the gentlemen here in front would like to make any closing comments before we end the session.
Let me just conclude perhaps by saying the following. We come back with a message of hope. It's a message of hope that South Africa can be turned into the winning country it can be. There are certain problems that need to be addressed. And if you look at the Government of National Unity, for instance, I believe there are two fundamental problems there. The parties that bought into the Government of National Unity did so because we all agreed that we should have economic growth and we should have job creation. It seems that ANC is under the impression that their current economic policies are sufficient to make that possible, economic growth and job creation. Reality indicates that in the last 15 years we barely made 1% growth and we've got this huge unemployment. Clearly, we need a new economic policy, or we need adaptations to the economic policy, and it seems that our second largest trading partner is also of that view. So that's a challenge that needs to be discussed. The second one, why did the focus come onto South Africa by the American administration of President Trump at the beginning? It's a problem that international relations in the Government of National Unity is being treated as the exclusive domain of the ANC. Because of that, South Africa decided to take certain steps. And it's not South Africa. It's the ANC part of the government of national unity. When a statement is issued condemning Iran, the attack of Israel on Iran, in the name of the South African, in the name of South Africa, it's not even the government of national unity statement, because international relations is the exclusive domain of the ANC. If we want this government of national unity to succeed, we need to talk, have a serious discussion amongst ourselves about economic policy, about international relations. But we come back with a positive message. We can turn things around. And I think we have to turn things around, not only in the interest of the Afrikaner community that we went out and to put their case, and other minorities, but in the best interest of all South Africans who at the moment don't see economic growth and don't see job creation. We're optimistic, positive, it can be done.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mulder and the rest of the delegation, for your time and for being here today, and also to the media. I do appreciate your attendance, and this then concludes the session. Thank you.